John Fowler was himself who actually invented, in inverted commas, the steam plough as we know it today. Fowler's spent an awful lot of time manufacturing ploughing engines. Initially they were sold to America and to Egypt for growing either cotton or sugar, and they made a lot of money over a long period. Over a distance of something like 300 or 400 yards, you can't talk to people, so they use whistles to indicate when the plough had arrived at one of them. Whistle and the motor engine, and then to actually put the balance plough in position to the ground, and it then pulls the balance plough back towards itself. Another Fowler follows on, Fowler, which are two other locomotives transporting large objects, large pieces of machinery like ship propellers and dynamos all over the country. Norman Box was the person who actually items that could not go on the railway. Using three engines, as I mentioned, two at the front and one behind. The one at the back was used basically as a brake as necessary for going down hills. Very similar in looks to the engine behind the Norman Box's Fowler, which later passed on to a well-known firm called Pickford, who I'm sure many of you will have heard of. The big engine following on with all the shiny brasswork, etc., was new to Windsor and Newport. It was also a heavy haulage engine built by Burroughs in Thetford in Norfolk, and it was used again for heavy haulage. But later in its life, it passed into Shoreland, and at that time, of course, to move the Shoreland load and roundabouts and to that nature, judges, etc., from place to place, they used the engine in that nature, such that they had a dynamo on the front, as you can see, and they powered the right of electricity when they got to where they were going. So it was very much of a workhouse. It was something at Retford in Nottinghamshire, and it's a very well-known engine in this neck of the woods. It's called Princess of Wales, which of course is a nod to where it worked originally in South Wales, and it's part of the collection that is owned by the Ragsdale family, of which we shall see more later. Following on behind Dave Ragsdale's big Burrow is a smaller Burrow, also with a dynamo on the front, but this one used to be a steamroller engine design, and it has actually been made into a four-wheel vehicle, a steamroller like we've seen previously, such that it could be used, if necessary, on the showground, but I don't think it's ever powered a ride owned by a showman. That was made, as I say, in Norfolk, again with Burroughs, and behind that we've got a small Fowler, a small Tiger tractor, something like 4 horsepower, compared with the big engine, which is 7 or 8 or 9 or even 10 horsepower machine. The Fowler Tiger tractor was a very useful machine for market guarding their wares to the local market. It also saw use in hauling stones about for rotating, to be put down by a gang of chaps and then rolled in by a steamroller going into the county towns. Norman Box's Fowler, which is just crossing the commentary point, is actually owned by a gentleman called Mike Greener, who lives in Aberdeen. Today, who is a friend of mine. He used to live next door to me, did my friend, and he brought it down to show it to various rallies and other people alone, to bring it from Aberdeen down to the sensible places where we live now. A fascinating machine. It was built probably 1927 time when haulage engines were still around, That's before pickup has expanded into the heavy haulage engine and facilities that they have got today. Rob Tyler's little Fowler tanker tractor, which is headed towards the commentary point at the moment with a number 19 on the front so I can identify it. I remember seeing this one just before Rob bought it at an auction sale in Lincolnshire. It's a place called Heckington. That will be round about 1996. So next year he will have owned it for something like 20 years. And Robert resurrected it, if I can use that particular expression, because when he bought it, it was on a number of pallets at this auction at Beckington, where there is a five-tail window. And I followed its progression in the situation. It's in its basically original condition, because most of the other vehicles that you see today in the field are on rubber tyres, because it suited the purpose to be so. Rob kept it on its original strips. And so it's about as near as you can get it to what it would have looked like when it was actually working in days gone by for farmers or other councils or other people who own. It's been followed by another Fowler, again built in the Steam Plough Works in Leeds, belonging to the Saunders family, who live near Barnsley. They've owned it for just over 12 months. It is a roller, so it was started life as a roller back in 1927, and it was unusual in this day and age because it was a car spring roller. In other words, on top of the belly tank there was a pump which was powered from a chain from a flywheel, and on the back of the roller at that time there would have been a spray bar, which sprayed hot tar of course, but you put chipping, and then you follow that up with a road roller. And this particular roller at that time, now a traction engine, was used for tar spraying, and it was followed up by a steamroller, such as the one by David Hare, which is passing the commentary point at the moment, owned by the local council in Northallerton Road District Council, in around about 1916. A year or so after my own roller of 1950. RCC, of course, it passed to the North Riding County Council around about 1931, because that's when the major reorganisations took place in the council areas brought about by the government. And following Dave Hare's machine, we have another Aveling roller. This one was supplied to the government of Ceylon. We know it today as Sri Lanka, of course, and Malcolm Hill was able to purchase it as one of 7 steamrollers that came back to the UK in the 1990s as a result of a deal by a contractor in the UK who wanted to supply some plant and equipment, such as cranes and things of that nature, to the Ceylon government, and he didn't get any payment, I don't believe, but he got 7 steamrollers in payment for that machine. It was a single speed, but it was very slow as a single speed machine, and indeed Malcolm has been able to fit a second speed to it to make it a little bit faster. Following on from that, another Fowler, which was supplied as its number plate in 1899. It wouldn't have been registered in 1899, but there was no such thing as the current registration situation available then, but it's owned by the Green family in Lincolnshire, and they have another machine on the road, on the rally field today. That's been followed by another Evelyn and Porter roller conversion belonging to Derek Webb, South Yorkshire. And I believe it's been driven at the moment by Matthew Carp of Derek Webb. It's a 1912 machine, built as a steamroller, as I say, but converted now to a showman's tractor with a dynamo on the front. With a Scottish registration, so it was actually supplied to Scotland. I think it was somewhere to the south of Glasgow, and again being followed by another Scottish roller. This one's identity has been somewhere over the other side of Scotland, owned by Russ Inman and kept locally by Russ, who organises another rally of smaller version of this particular rally, somewhere close to where he lives. And we've now got another showman's tractor owned by the same family, Green family, as the fowler we saw earlier. This one's called Lloyd George. Luke, yes, it's called Lloyd George. I'm reading what it says. Peter's the father. Stainfield in Lincolnshire. Now I happen to know that today is a Sunday and Peter Green is a reverend, so he should be in church, but he's not. He's here, I believe. He is in church, not here. He's doing his job. Evelyn and Porter roller, 1923. All Durat May. Supplied to the Bournemouth area in 1923 and used there by a contractor by the name of Francis until 1963 when he joined the preservation movement. A roller owned by Malton Woodbine, which has got a very typical box on the back, very similar to my steamroller, has a box with the Chenier Blackpool called Walls, and it was owned in working times by Isaac Ball. Isaac Ball fitted a lot of steamrollers that they owned for road making activities with a box of that nature to hold oil and tools and tackle and other things, and Malcolm's owned it for quite a long time now. We've got another Evelyn roller coming along, owned by Laurie Fletcher, being driven at this stage by his daughter, which is perhaps an unusual situation in the preservation era, but nothing unusual because it's been under the safe control of Laurie's daughter for quite a long time, and she's learned how to drive the steamroller. Weekend have been somewhat inconvenient. Now unfortunately for various reasons Elvis Newcastle Rally this year is not happening. They're hoping to resurrect it sometime later. We have got here today one or two of the engines that would have been at Elveston next weekend, and this one is a Foster built in Lincoln, owned by the Bosworth family. As it says on the side of it, I've known this engine for quite a long time when it was owned by John Bosworth and by Fosters of Lincoln. On the front of it, if you look very carefully, you will see a cast replica of a tank. It was Fosters who actually built the first tanks of the First World War, and that particular emblem on the front of the traction engine, called Sprig now, is a very good reminder of the fact that Fosters were involved in that rather, what shall we say, interesting vehicle known as the water tank from Mesopotamia, that came onto the scene in the First World War, and some people say it was the item, the mechanical item that actually won the war. I cannot possibly comment on that particular thing. But we've another ex-Nottinghamshire engine, again built in Lincoln by another well-known firm in traction engine scenario, Ruston and Hornsby, Ruston Proctor preceded Ruston and Hornsby. The changeover time was about 1918, and this particular one is owned by David Farmer, following on from his father, Harry Farmer, who actually owned it a very long time ago when David was a youngster. We've all grown older, of course, at the time, and he's been steered by one of the Bosworth family, which I think is quite nice from that point of view. Ruston Proctor made also steam, or Ruston and Hornsby and Ruston Proctor made steamrollers, and indeed David has a Ruston Proctor steamroller, as well as a Ruston Proctor traction engine. As many people find in this day and age, of course, managing and looking after two steam engines is somewhat of an arduous task, but he's not the only person on the field today who has two. Somebody else, but there are other people on the team today who actually have more than one machine. Missing out the Garrett tractor, the J Will on the canopy side, because I can't find it at the moment on my piece of paper in front of me. Not an unusual situation I find myself in, but it's not one from around this neck of the woods, and it's not one I know particularly well.
You're getting some good video footage.
These is well represented.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I was thinking.
Work, and how it was able to pull one from one.
If it's ain't done, then you'll say, oh, some more coming in, you can have them ones coming in. Yeah.
A late entry, owned by Mrs. is James Penfold, another fowler, built before the turn of the century, built at the turn of the century, and supplied to the southern end of the country. Nick Walters was driving it, should have been here today with his Garrett Steam wagon, but unfortunately he suffered a malfunction of it on the way home from the rally at Emley Moor last weekend, and he decided that he would bring, instead of the Garrett Steam wagon, he would bring this fowler belonging to his wife. So we're very grateful to Mick for bringing that along. We've now got another fowler, a somewhat larger fowler, owned by the Selby family from Epworth in Lincolnshire, as it says. I remember seeing this particular machine in 1963 in a gala at Ossett, owned at that time by a gentleman called who worked at Colchester Plant Works. Had a number of owners since then, and owned now by James Selby, and it's a very good representative of a Fowler road locomotive. The gentleman who worked at Doncaster was called Jim Massey, and I knew Jim relatively well at that particular time. Coming past the commentary point at the moment is Lord Doverdale, owned by the driver Dave Cope, who lives in Nasslock area of North Derbyshire. It belonged to Partington's at Glossop and was partnered there by another similar Fowler tractor until quite recently. They used it for hauling their goods around from Oliver Partington in the Glossop area. The other one I think was used as parts to bring the one that we've just seen back into working order. I can call the next machine a unique machine because Cumberland County Council is all over it. It's maroon when it was in Cumberland County Council's ownership. It's driven again by a Evening and Porter traction engine and one of the oldest Evening and Porter steamrollers in the country. Got that wrong way around, I think. But, nevertheless, Richard Huller has restored this to excellent condition. It is actually a roller that was supplied in 1910 and it was commandeered by the military. Whether it ever went to France for the First World War, we don't know. But the military said that we will provide you with the roller back again to Southend County Corporation after the war. Something happened and that didn't actually happen, but Southend Corporation bought themselves another new steamroller, enabling during the war, and this one was sold at auction, military vehicles, etc. after the war, and was bought by Cumberland County Council. So it's called Elizabeth, and it is in pristine condition at the moment. Now, Rachel was happy last weekend to actually be able to talk to the granddaughter of the gentleman who actually owned it and operated it, in its commercial use when we were at Emlymore Rally. The fowl that just passed the commentary position is called, I'll remember in a moment, but it belonged to Dave Maris. I believe it's entered by Mrs. Maris. A number of traction engines and steamrollers just outside Sheffield, and it's good to see it here in the Maris family's ownership, especially since it's got J.W. Cuthbert on the side of it as memory to the gentleman concerned. It's called Empress because at one time it was called Empress of India, and consequently it was a long name, was that, and decided that they would actually cut it down to Empress. Another of the Raggedale family, James Raggedale, owns the Garrett tractor that we've just seen from past the commentary position. That was resurrected by James from not a lot of bits. Brought it back into what looks like Showman's ownership. I don't think it was owned by Showman, but it was certainly used in Northern Ireland for hauling chains and things to the vessel in the shipyard. Ragsdale's family's machines is this one passing the commentary position now. It's called Abigail, owned by Abigail, but it's not Abigail that's driving it at the moment because the gentleman driving it has got a beard. Quite likely it is Abigail who's walking alongside with Lady in a pouch in front of her. The CT registration, of course, it was new, or registered, sorry, at the time in Lincolnshire, Stephen County, as was my machine, my old steamroller. We've got a couple of engines coming past the commentary position at the moment. The one in front, which is the green steamroller, is somewhat embarrassed, or the owner's somewhat embarrassed because I think he blew a tube yesterday. Consequently, he's not able to drive it round. It was commercial use by Monkton's of Highbridge, a big West Country contractor. It was built by Bob Wilcox, it says on the side, but in actual fact the design is a Clayton and Shuttleworth. Babcock Wilcox took over Clayton and Shuttleworth and continued making steamrollers. A lot of steamrollers are there were actually supplied to Babcock to Monkton's in Highbridge and Burnham-on-Sea. Been pushed along behind, or in front of, shall I say, the engine behind, the rather scruffy looking engine, is actually owned by the Baines family, or maybe Andrew and son, and it spent some 43 years locked away in a shed in the North Nottinghamshire area. It resurrected relatively recently, and they decided to keep it in its working condition, so that you can see lots of engines on the field today which are nicely polished and brasswork, etc., and clean. But this is how it ended its life, in particular Airling and Porter tractor. We've now got a Fowler roller traction engine, which has been stared at by the older Andrew Midlands, as I'm getting across the board, of course. Nothing unusual from my point of view, but the thing that is important about this machine is it was imported, brought back to the UK, built by Fowler's